Hey there, welcome to Classroom 5.0, a podcast helping you to design a future of learning, work, and leadership that's both personally meaningful and creates impact for a better world. I'm your host, Marianne Power, and I'm thrilled you're joining me for another episode of our Inclusive Impact series. You can expect topics and interviews that deep dive into what it takes to build a truly diverse and equitable world, and learn science-backed skills and soul-filled strategies helping our different kind of difference makers to thrive. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of our homeland, Virpai Country, where this podcast was recorded, and pay our respect to elders past, present, and emerging. It's a pleasure and a privilege to play, live, and work on country, and I'm so glad you're here. So let's dive on in to today's episode. Bella Stevens, welcome to Classroom 5.0. It's been a hot minute since you and I talked about this conversation, so I'm very excited to be having it. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
I am too. I'm excited because I can't wait to bring to our listeners your incredible wealth of knowledge, but also your personal story about, dealing and managing our health and the importance of that. Anyway, enough about me. I'm going to throw it over to you, Bella. Introduce yourself. Who are you in the world? Why are you here? Why are we having this conversation? More importantly, let's start with your origin story, because I think our listeners will be very curious to hear about your own health journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess for myself, my whole life has basically revolved around taking care of my health. So when I was born, I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, which for those of you who don't know is a recessive genetic condition. But it basically affects the lungs, pancreas, and liver mainly. But my parents were basically told in one of those first meetings that I would be in hospital a minimum of twice a year for about a fortnight at a time for the rest of my life.
Wow.
And they refer to these like fortnightly, I guess they call them tune-ups, where they put you on IV antibiotics for 2 weeks at a time, regardless of whether you're sick or not. It's more of just like a just in case.
Every year?
Yeah, twice
every
a
year,
year.
twice a year. That's the standard protocol. I didn't realize
that's the
that.
standard protocol.
Wow.
And the same thing when I was 2, they said to my parents, we're going to put her on antibiotics for 12 months. Again, just in case, like there's nothing, technically wrong, but we just want to, it's just what we do.
Approach. Yeah.
Preventative approach. And I think about what I know now about gut health and hormone health and all of those things. Like that's a crime to totally destroy the bacterial home that we have in our gut, in our body at such a young age. It really sets us up for some pretty horrendous issues down the track from whether it be leaky gut or hormone conditions or whatever it be. But back to it, my parents basically left that meeting, that first one where they said, you'd be in hospital twice a year for the rest of your life. They basically left and just said to each other, we're going to do whatever we have to do to not make that our reality.
Wow.
And I'm so grateful that was the approach that they took, because that then obviously reflected onto me and carried on with me. But I'm 23 now, and I can say that I think I've been admitted to hospital maybe 4 or 5 times in that 23-year period, for longer than a day. And I successfully run my own business now in the health and wellbeing space, and definitely want to kind of step into that inspirational but also like motivational and supportive role of people that do live with chronic conditions, to help them believe that they can create the health that they want, and not everything that they're told from doctors or a professional point of view is going to be right for them.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because those standard protocols that we have in medicine are there because it's what we've known has worked and kept people safe and well for as long as possible. And yet I think that there's a lot of research now emerging and understanding, like you said, about the gut and the implications of antibiotics. And so we're really starting to revisit a lot of the ways that we used to approach things. And as I listen to you speak, the word advocacy just keeps coming to mind. What an incredible role your parents and yourself have played in really I'm guessing, and I want to hear your version of this, getting to understand your unique physical, mental profile, spiritual profile, and then being able to wrap your own sort of medical protocol around that. And I'm curious to hear what that journeys look like, that advocacy piece, but also how did you find the information together to help guide your journey?
So I suppose as a family, we were very intentional about the life that we created from the get go.
Mm.
So we moved to the beach from like the Epping way, so in inner Sydney, when I was
Mm-hmm.
about 3. Because I don't know if many people know this, but from a cystic fibrosis point of view, living near the ocean and being in the ocean is one of the best things that you can do. So,
Huh.
um, as a part of CF and one of the the medications that they give out, which I do every day, is a saline nebulizer. So basically, salt water that you inhale to help clear the mucus from the lining of the lungs. So when you're in the ocean or around the
Wow.
ocean, it not that it mimics because it's not to the same level, but it
Yeah.
is a huge benefit for lung health in general. So I was pretty much, I'm not going to say thrown in the ocean, but I was drawn to the ocean from a very, very young age. And that I initially started with nippers, but I then quickly got into surfing and started my surfing journey from there. So that was one of the really big things that we did. I've had the same doctor of Chinese medicine since I was 4, I believe. So she
Wow.
treated me with cupping and acupuncture and Chinese herbs as like a slightly alternative version of the Western medicine system. And that was
Mm-hmm.
just my
Mm-hmm.
preference and what I wanted to do and what I wanted to explore. Same thing with my family, because I think we still obviously had to have regular meetings with the Western medicine doctors,
Mm.
and they would, recommend or provide medication based on where I was at and what my health was like. But we always did so much research and asked so many questions around, what are the side effects of
Mm.
this? How long would they be on this for? Um,
Mm.
why am I taking this in the first place? And if the answer wasn't good
Mm.
enough, we'd find a different way. Like we would get a second opinion. I would check in with my doctor of Chinese medicine and say, like, is there an alternative path for this or
Mm-hmm.
treatment of this sort of thing? Um, because I always think, like, for me, finding the alternative way was always the best for me, aside from points where I was like very acutely unwell, like where I did need IV antibiotics or I did need, nebulized antibiotics. There's definitely a time
Yeah.
and place. Um, but we try to most of the time use the alternative.
Yeah. And so looking at that more sort of what we would call integrative functional health, I believe is a technical term, isn't it? Which is kind of controversial here in Australia, at least. And
Mm.
what I love about what you're sharing is that from what I can gather, this isn't about throwing anything out. It's about putting everything on the table rather,
Yeah.
which is an additive model as opposed to a, let's just ditch one way of seeing the world. And I really respect and appreciate those beautiful questions that you asked that I would imagine helped you to guide, more autonomous decision making around um, having control around your own health and what that looks like, knowing what your options are. What an incredibly conscious way to manage your health. Do you remember? I'm so curious. I'm going to throw you off script here. Do you remember a
It's
point in
okay.
time as a littly or maybe a little bit older where you had some of those sort of tipping points from, mum and dad are really guiding this journey along from the ride into like, this is my health. This is something I want to take control of. What was that about?
Mm. Gosh, that's such a good question because I think even now my parents are still a huge part of my life and a big
Yeah.
part of navigating my health, mainly because we've always done it together. I still live at home with them.
Hmm.
Um, but we still always, like, it's definitely much more my decision now. But
Mm,
it's always a conversation. We explore things
mm,
together. I'll say, like, what do you think about this? Or, like, can we look into these options? And one distinctive one that I remember that was like a real, I think I'd say shell shock at the time, but um, when one of the cystic fibrosis drugs came out from not a cure point of view, but pretty much like a treatment that removes most of the
Stock standard.
symptoms. Stock
Wow.
standard.
Okay.
And it was a drug that we've been waiting for a really long time.
How
And
old
it
were
was
you?
something. So from when I found out about it, I want to say early teens. It had just been it had just gone through the FDA in America, and so they said that it would be kind of in Australia in the next couple of years. They did the trials in Australia, it got released here, but the thing is there's different types of genes with cystic fibrosis. So some of the medications treat certain genes. And I have one of those wonky genes, as they like to call it, which one would they didn't know where it came from. Like it was quite a rare one. But then I have one of the more normal ones as well. But I remember it had finally come here. They'd finally finished the trials, and they had said, like, if you'd like to take it and try it, you can.
Yeah.
And it was something that I'd waited so long for. And I remember thinking at the time, I could absolutely say yes right now to taking this, but I knew as well what the side effects were and what the risk would run. So one of them was elevated liver enzymes, for example. And I stopped drinking. I didn't ever drink very much, but I stopped drinking when I was 18 in an effort to bring those liver enzymes down so that I could come onto that drug when it came to. But the risk with this drug was that it was going to elevate the enzymes again. And I was like, I haven't worked for the last 5 years to bring those liver enzymes down naturally, to then go onto a drug that's going to elevate them and then possibly mean that I have to come off the medication anyway.
So that would have been an outcome.
That could have been an absolute outcome, and it may not have worked. It may have, but I was also not in a position health-wise where I was like, I'm in a steady enough state to maintain the health that I have now, the way that I've been doing it for the last 23 years, rather than take the chance. And I think for me, that was a really big decision, number one, because it was also my decision. But I'm really grateful that I did make that decision then. So yes, you talk about the parent point of view.
What a turning point. I was going to say, how did your parents cope with that decision? I'm a mum, my daughter's not that much younger than you. And as a mum, you just want your daughter to be as healthy as they can be. And obviously your parents have been along this journey with you, but to have all waited so long for this, promise of a magic cure, I can imagine, to then be faced with the decision of, okay, but what are the actual outcomes? What are the actual side effect profiles? Is this drug actually for me? Like, how did your parents respond?
They supported it 100% because they thought it was the right decision.
Wow.
They knew that the work that we had done wasn't necessarily worth taking that risk, I think. Because we live a perfectly great life, and my health was
great.
Touch wood, great, So it wasn't at the stage where we were like, oh, it's probably worth the risk,
Yeah, this is going to push some buttons, Bella. There are going to be listeners who feel really comfortable and safe in our medical model, who want to know that when they go to the doctor, they're told what to do, and that is the absolute treatment that will work for them unequivocally, that there's no question about it. And what I'm hearing you say is that, hang on, we need to take a pause. These medicines are fantastic. Our science is great, but it can only tell us so much. So if you're listening right now and there's that level of like, oh, that uncomfortable feeling of not quite knowing, I just want you to lean in, just notice some of those, those biases that are popping up, or those assumptions popping up, or where you're feeling like, I don't know if I feel comfortable with this, and lean in. Because what I'm hearing you say, Bella, is that, again, this is all about choice, and this is all about checking in with yourself, knowing what all the options are, and really rallying with the people around you who know you very well, and some very informed, highly educated decision making here, which is what blows my mind about you at such a young age. Like, I'm just in awe. This is just amazing. Yeah, she's holding her finger up. Go, tell
Can,
me.
can
You've
I
got
add
something
one
to
more
say.
thing? I was going to
Yes.
say,
So
I
many
just want to
things.
add one more piece to that. And I was
Yeah.
going to say, um, you are always going to be your own best advocate for your health. And I
Mm,
think it's important to feel like you have control over your health and the decisions associated. Because I
mm,
find a lot of people that I've spoken to, they will outsource the information, the decisions that they make around their health, and they feel really vulnerable, and there's almost like that lack of trust there because they're not sure if they've made the right decision.
mm,
Um, and that's where I encourage you to ask questions. I encourage you to do your own research, get a second opinion, talk to people that have experienced something similar, um, and decide for yourself, is this right for me? Because yes, that might take a bit more work,
mm,
but it's so incredibly important. And it's a process of getting information, sifting through it, and determining, is this right for me? This is your health and you're driving the
mm.
bus. So there's no other alternative in my eyes, I find.
Oh, I've got tingles. I'm so glad you added that piece. Well said. Well said. I like mic drop. We could just stop the conversation right there and then, but let's not. If you're a leader of a business or in charge of a team of people, then chances are you're probably in the thick of getting up to speed on Australia's new psychosocial safety legislation. By law, companies now need to do what they can to protect their people against stress and burnout. But my question to you is that in creating your policies, procedures, and programs, are you accounting for the different kinds of brains in your workplace? Because stats would suggest maybe not. In the tech sector, for example, 54% of people identify as neurodivergent. And yet, when we ask employers what they think that number is, they report back 3%. Now, that gap poses a significant problem because without specialized understanding of neurodiversity, traditional policies and programs risk missing the mark, leading to higher instances of burnout, stress, and both physical and mental health challenges and outcomes for our community. But understanding neurodiversity is more than just compliance, it's also about unlocking innovation. You see, diverse companies are 70% more likely to attract new markets and 36% more profitable than homogenous ones. I personally believe that neurodivergent leaders are the different kind of difference makers that our world needs right now. That's why I'm so excited to be launching the Neuro Impact Network. We're changing the game for neurodiversity leadership and bringing both our neurodivergent leaders and allies together where we can share science-backed strategies that support legal compliance and equip us with everything we need to be able to build neuro-inclusive workplaces. Plus, peak performance and human flourishing science strategies that ensure we thrive and protect our mental health, alongside community events so that we can truly connect and share one another's strengths, wins, and challenges along the way. Neurodivergent leaders, listen up. I really believe this is our time and our space to shine, and it's such a privilege to be welcoming you into this space. So if it sounds like something that's for you, if you're ready to say goodbye to burnout and hello to innovation that actually delivers impact, I'd love to see you on the inside. Everything you need for the applications are in the link below. I look forward to seeing you there. Because I want to transfer this across to the work that you're doing right now, which is really, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's empowering other people with information and knowledge, but also some of this work around, clearing those biases and clearing those assumptions that we make about who is in charge of our health to really empower ourselves and take control of the direction of our lives. And so with that in mind, with that work in mind and that purpose in mind, I want to ask you about your thoughts. I kind of know what the answer is going to be, but in terms of where you see health, well-being, mindset in our future world of work.
I think it's a really critical piece to kind of investigate on a multitude of levels. One, from an individual sense, but also if you're working as a part of a business or you have employees, whether you're in a corporation, like there's so many different ways to look at this, but I'm going to bring it all the way back down to individual
Good.
because I think if I think about holistic health and the times that I've felt my best in just daily life or in a working sense or, whatever it be, I'm going to touch on physical health in a moment, but when my mental health and my emotional health is really well taken care of, that's when I feel like I'm really thriving. The physical health for me has always been something that I've worked really hard at. So that's not necessarily something that I have to work as hard at as I do with my mental and emotional. And I think a lot of that ties back to, funnily enough, the food that we put in our body, the amount of sleep that we get, and the way that we manage stress. And that in combination with the physical, so with movement, and that's why I created the program that we were talking about, that Ground Zero program, is to look at those fundamentals of holistic health and well-being and go, let's just bring everything back to the very simple. I say simple because it is simple, but it's hard to implement. If you're, I talk to so many people and I have a lot of clients that work full-time jobs, they run a family, they have all of these other things going on in their life that they feel like they don't have time to take care of themselves. But I have, and don't get me wrong, I have absolutely done this myself, but if you're not taking care of you and your needs on a deeper level, or even a fundamental level, you're going to get to the stage where you just don't feel good about your body, your health, the work that you do. It's very all interconnected, and it always has been for me. That's why I think I've also learnt to be very self-aware. So, for example, when I was working in my commercial gym job a couple of years ago, I just completely fried my nervous system, number one, because you're just living in this constant fight or flight stage. You're not getting enough rest. You don't have like set times that you're eating, or you don't have time to, properly nourish yourself. Social connections, I think, was a really big one as well. Surrounding yourself with people that are positive and have positive views about health. Because I love being that for people, but I also want to be around people that do the same. It's really interesting, actually. Just as a side note, in the holistic health training that I did, they call it the Wheel of Life, and it has like, I think maybe 12 different aspects on it, but like home environment, community. There's obviously all of the fundamental ones, so physical health, home cooking, family, friends, joy. Like there's just so many different aspects.
That addition of joy. That's beautiful. Yeah.
Really
I mean, as
lovely.
you were speaking, I was thinking through that positive psychology framework, and listeners who are familiar with that type of work will know the PERMA framework. So that's positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, sense of accomplishment, and health was added at the end. But, health has got so many, like you said, spokes to the wheel within it itself that you're picking up on that are just brilliant. And actually another one, I'm going to throw your script again. I was reading, because I know that you're a surfer and you and I have had a bit of a tease. I'm so keen to come with you to Byron for your retreat and learn how to surf. I have threatened it for many a years. I may have gotten into the ocean a few times and had that surfboard kick me in the head. So look, there is some fear mindset that Maz is going to have to overcome, but I know you're my gal. But I was reading some really interesting data on the state of flow. And I know that surfers talk a lot about chasing flow, and that being their, their present-centered moment out in the ocean and the joy that brings. And in fact, can I read it to you? I think you're going to find this fascinating. This is out of the book, The Art of Impossible. And it talks about, from a neurobiological perspective, what's actually going on in our brains and our bodies and our whole system when we access that flow state. So it says, flow may be the biggest neurochemical cocktail of all. The state appears to blend all 6 of the brain's major pleasure chemicals and may be one of the few times you get all 6 at once. This potent mix explains why people describe flow as their favorite experience, while psychologists refer to it as the source code of intrinsic motivation. How good is that? And just to double click,
It's
because I know
so
people are going
good.
to be like, well, what are the 6 neurotransmitters? What are we talking about? Okay, so I wrote them down for you. We're talking dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. This one I always pronounce incorrectly, but excuse me while I try. Norepinephrine. How'd I go? And
Yep,
endorphins,
nice.
anandamide. Ta-da,
Yep.
all 6 of those. So they're all,
Mm.
really responsible for different parts of our health and well-being. And all of those pieces that you mentioned, our social connections, food, gut health, which we're going to get to next, mindset, they all play to create this cocktail of experience that then motivates us. Um, I'm curious to hear about surfing for you. Is it a flow state? And now that I understand the health mechanics as well, I didn't know that. And that's amazing.
Yeah. There's very few circumstances that I can think of that I feel happier in than the ocean.
Wow.
Um, it has, and not even necessarily surfing. Surfing, absolutely. Like, I just came back from Bali, funnily enough, and we spent most of the days surfing there. I could honestly just go and be an island princess for the rest of my life and just surf every day and be very happy, because I think every time I come in, and also the sheer joy of watching my dad surf and sharing that with each other is
Mm,
one of the most special things in my life. Um,
that's beautiful.
but I, and I know there's another aspect of that as well. Being near ocean from a mental health point of view, it's something to do with negative ions, and like
Mhm.
the rebalancing of our body and things like that,
Spot
like
on. Nervous
grounding,
system care. Yeah,
nervous
absolutely.
system care.
Yeah.
And it's actually very funny. I was talking about this with one of my best friends the other day, and she goes, "You'll always be able to know like where I'm at in a mental breakdown stage." She'll go like the bigger the body of water, the bigger the problem. So
Oh,
if I'm having a bath, it's like it's a bit of a blip on the radar. If it's like a lake, it's slightly bigger. But if we're at the ocean, like everything's just all hell's broken loose. And I was like, that is possibly the funniest thing I've ever heard.
that's
Because I
brilliant.
think it doesn't matter what's going on, being near the ocean just like mellows everything out, that flow state, exactly.
And what I love about all of that is that I think healthcare and mindset care and emotions and spirituality. I'm using this tone of voice because I can hear some people rolling their eyes going, oh, they're in the bucket of nice to have. So I don't have time for that. But if you're somebody who cares about creating a meaningful work life design for yourself, and let's be honest, reaching and creating your goals and having that sort of peak performance state, then if you're
Yeah,
not paying attention to these things, then you're missing out, because it's through those production of all of those neurochemicals that are then important for our motivation, for our creativity, for innovation, for our performance.
yeah,
Yeah, look, I could talk to you about this all day. I know our listeners are going to want gut health, gut health tips, because gut health is kind of this, not so new, but hashtag new hipster thing that's coming onto the scene.
yeah.
Everybody wants to know how to look after their gut.
Mm.
Can you share with us some top tips in terms of where we might be able to start?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one thing that I really like, and I'm not going to mention all of them, but it's called the 5R gut
Okay.
framework.
Oh, I
So,
haven't heard of it before. Nice. I'm going to write that down.
the first step is kind of the most important one for me, and then I'll add on to that as we go. But the first R is remove. So
Mhm.
taking out a couple of these things will massively help um, from a point of view if you've got quite an unbalanced gut microbiome. These will help to kind of reset back to a base.
Mhm.
So they talk about removing NSAIDs. So if you're on any like Panadol, Nurofen, those sorts of drugs, um, not great for our gut microbiome. They kind of kill off some of the good bacteria, but also kind of lead into development of the worse kind of gut bacteria from a balance point of view.
So if you have
Um,
to take them, take them. But if you don't is kind of the key message. Got it.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I have a very interesting experience with pain. I always try alternative methods first
Uh-huh.
before Panadol or Nurofen or anything like that. Um, even as far as like essential oils, like if I've got a headache, peppermint oil is on my forehead, back of my neck, everything.
Nice tip.
Um, yes, very effective, very very effective. Um, Processed foods. So, from an
Mm-hmm.
inflammation point of view, inflammation is basically the root cause of most of our gut issues. So, we
Mm-hmm.
want to remove as much inflammation from our diet as possible. So, this is our processed foods, um, highly processed seed oils, so canola oil, vegetable oil, um, those sorts of oils. I always recommend olive oil, avocado oil, ghee, and coconut oil to my
Mm-hmm.
clients
Mm-hmm.
as options. Um, Alcohol is a really big player in terms of our gut health. Um, Again, more so feeding the bad bacteria rather than growing the good. So again, trying to rebalance. It helps to take that one out. What else do we have?
Antibiotics. Again, take them if you need to.
Antibiotics.
Don't
Thank
if you
you.
don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
And even things like antibacterial soaps or um, like endocrine disruptors. So it's a really big one that we're big on in our family. Is we have a lot of natural cleaning products. I only use natural skincare. I find now if I put anything not natural or non-natural perfume on myself, my skin is so sensitive to it. Like I'll just get
Wow.
reactions and break out pretty much. So I always recommend those things um, to my clients as well if they're
Yeah.
quite sensitive. Um, but from there, you're looking at basically rebuilding the good forms of bacteria to help the balance back out.
Yeah.
So anti-inflammatory foods, so a lot of fruit and vegetables. Again, trying to buy organic with that so that you're not getting the pesticides and herbicides
Mm.
that are sprayed on them. And if you do, then there's certain ways, for example, that you can wash berries in like bicarb soda and let them soak to get the chemicals and things off before you eat them.
Mm.
Um, they also say like not to have too much meat on when you're reintroducing that bacteria
Mm-hmm.
balance, but always organic and trying to not do antibiotic or hormone like injected meat.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that we're really particular about. Um, Fiber and then kind of colors. So getting as much color as you can. All of the different colors are relevant to different micronutrients and things like polyphenols. So the antioxidants that will, that keep us healthy and fight the free radicals in our body, which is a big one from like fighting inflammation point of view.
Yeah.
And then you can, after that point, look at things like pre and probiotics to kind of further build those populations of good bacteria um, back to a state where you can feel like your gut's happy again.
Yeah, and it's so important because our gut, we now know, is connected to our brain. It makes everything work in unison. Having an unhealthy gut has got such huge implications for our energy, our mental clarity, our mood. There's lots of really
Absolutely.
rigorous research coming out now about the link between gut health and mental health. So I'm going to drop
Yep.
a few links in today's show notes for anybody who wants to dive into the science and get to know a little bit more about gut health. Has been inspired by Bella's story. And I'm going to imagine, if you're listening too, that maybe you're not someone who lives with a chronic health condition. Maybe you are, but maybe there's somebody that you know who's having a rough time of managing their health, who might be inspired by Bella's story and some of these tips that she's sharing today. Because Bella, like, I don't want to gloss over. I don't want to make this. How do I say this? I am so impressed by you and your mindset. And I want to ask you, behind all of this effort and this incredible outlook that you have on the outside, that get up and go despite what I imagine some really hard days. Nobody wants to have to live with a chronic health condition.
Mm.
what is it actually like to live with cystic fibrosis? And what do you want to say to people who are listening in, maybe thinking that, oh, it's okay for Bella, she's got it all together. What do you want to say about mindset and how that applies to managing our health?
It's such a great question. And I guess the first part of that, in terms of what it's like to live with a chronic condition, it's really hard. Like it's so much work, and it's not something that you can pretend that you don't have or is not part of your life. Like, you don't ever get to just like leave the baggage at the door and walk away, you
Yeah.
know? I think everyone has down days. And it was funny, I was having this conversation with my dad yesterday. Everyone has down days, and I've absolutely had them. But I think it's so important to allow yourself to have them, but not to get stuck there. And
Yeah.
I would always think about, on my off days, not, I would always think, what can I do? Not what should I do? And it may not necessarily be something that's, groundbreaking, but it might be like, I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to call one of my friends, or something that you can do that's going to make you feel that tiny bit better. And for me, it was always journaling. So I do a lot of gratitude and journal work. Slightly less at the moment, mainly because I'm very content and happy with where I'm at. But I always say, like, take the time to sit and look at your life almost from like an outsider's point of view, and make a list of the things that are going well in your life, or things that you're happy or grateful for, because I can guarantee you that that list of good will be longer than the bad. One thing that I was talking to my mum about, and one she was really particular about from the very beginning, and it's a quote that I love, and it's, the words you use become the house that you live in. And I was like, wow, we were so particular with the language that we used around the chronic conditions, cystic fibrosis in particular. She told my doctors that there were words that we were not going to use around me. So we were like she said, disease is not a word that we're going to use. There's like, disabled was not a word that we were going to use. Challenge, condition, they were fine. But the words that you talk to yourself with change everything around your mindset. And also the words that you allow other people to use around you regarding your condition also does. Like, it's a very big piece, and you're exposed to a lot of it. And I even remember, like, when I was younger and I would go on runs, I would say, like, I am strong, and it was always in like rhythm with my feet hitting the pavement. So there's like little things that you can tell yourself each day, or write them down, or have them on little post-it notes like scattered around your room, because I think not in preparation, I feel like that's the wrong word, but that there are going to be bad days in your health journey, and sometimes things can change at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
Like, you can be really healthy one day, and then the next week, you're in hospital.
Yeah.
Vice versa. Like, you're always, for me, I'm lucky. No, I'm not lucky. I work really hard at it. I was going to say.
You do work really hard about it. That was the thing I was thinking consistently as you were sharing. This is like peak performance training. And I just can't think of a greater reason to want to train like a peak performer than to safeguard your health, your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health, your emotional health, your life.
Absolutely.
It's just beautiful. All of that is beautiful. Those mini moments. Thank you. Are you ready for our lightning round?
Oh my gosh, I don't know what that is, but yes.
I've asked in this series our guests the same bunch of questions, and there's no right answer. Okay, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just what comes to mind when you think of a few words, and then I want to know, what you're reading, who you're listening to, all of that jazz. So the first one I've got for you.
Okay.
Oh, ready? Drum roll. When you think of the words an impact mindset, what comes to mind? What are the qualities someone with an impact mindset might have?
Strong, resilient, brave, courageous, um, supportive, creative. Um, they're probably the main ones that come to mind.
Brilliant. I love that. What about inclusive impact? What comes to mind then?
Gosh, that's actually a really good one. Inclusive, again, similar, like very much that's supportive, but willing to look at things in a variety of ways, like not just having one set way of doing something,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
catering to a variety of different people, individuals, or learning styles. Um, inclusive, and probably a really good listener, like listening to what
Mm.
people need, or um, how you can support them best, or how you can get them information that may not be how other people best receive information. Like being resourceful, for sure.
I love that. What are some of the books you're reading at the moment, or podcasts you're listening to, YouTube channels, TikTok stars that are inspiring you?
So, one book that I actually read a fair bit if I feel like I want to give myself a little bit of extra, like love or support, is called Good Morning, I Love You. And I
Oh,
think it's written by, is it Shauna Shapiro? Something along those lines. I can send it to you. But it's all about self compassion and practices to kind of get you back to thinking about yourself in a not selfish way, like taking care of
mm.
yourself and your mental state, and knowing that you're worth taking care of. Human Lab is one that I listen to
Oh,
podcast
yeah.
wise,
Have you got a
and the
favorite
ultimate.
episode you want to share with us? I love
Oh,
Huberman's work. So
the
good.
thing with
Send me some
human.
afterwards and we'll drop them in the show links.
Okay, the thing with human podcasts, I have to listen to them in like threes because
Yeah, they're
there's
so long.
so much
And
information,
there's so
but
much
I love it.
information. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Me too. Yeah.
Um, and the Ultimate Human podcast by Gary Brecker is the other one,
I
all
haven't
about
heard of Gary's work.
biohacking.
Awesome.
So yes, they're probably the main ones.
I love
I love
those. I'm going to
looking at
drop them all in.
cooking videos, all of them.
All of it. All of it. I love it. And this one's the big one for you. What does it mean to live a meaningful life?
I think life's too short to not be doing things that make you happy or being surrounded by people that make you happy. Um, I think I actually, not that I spend a lot of time doing this, but when I watch the videos of when they interview people in their 90s, or in palliative care, for example, and they ask them, what are the things that you regret the most, or what do you think you should have spent more time doing, or it's always like, things like not caring about what other people think, not
Mm,
worrying about like having so much money that you could. I'm not worrying about having too much money. Sorry, is more what I was trying to say. Being financially stable, um, and traveling the world, not working as much as you think you should, and being around the people that you really care about and making the effort to keep those relationships.
that's beautiful. Thank you. Now, I know you've got your Ground Zero program. I'm going to share a link to that in our show notes so that listeners who want to get in touch and work with you know how to find you. Plus, like I mentioned, this exciting retreat that's coming up. Let's go
Yep,
surfing in November.
let's go surfing. Yes.
But how else can our listeners reach out to connect with you and follow your journey and your work after they've heard you here today?
The Instagram is one of the ways that I like to share my content, more as a bit of fun. But everything you will need will be on my website, which we can pop below as well.
Beautiful. I love it. I'll pop all of that in the show notes below. Bella, thank you so much for sharing incredible insights and wisdom, but your heart with us all, because it is so big. It lights me up every time we speak, and I know it's going to do the same for our listeners. And listeners, thank you for joining us for another episode of Classroom 5.0 and for your interest in inclusive impact. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Classroom 5.0. If this episode sparked an insight for you, why not share it with a friend who might benefit too? Or spread the word by leaving your rating and review. I read every single one, and I promise your interest in impact means the world. Classroom 5.0 is brought to you by the Posify Group, a psychology coaching and consulting company specializing in neurodiversity and purpose-driven leadership, equipping today and tomorrow's leaders with the future skills and mindsets needed to thrive and create impact. To learn more about our work and to access today's show notes, links, and more episodes just like these, you can visit www.theposifygroup.com.au/podcast. I'll see you next time.